Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Greenside Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of landscape architecture and explore the creative minds shaping our outdoor spaces. I'm your host, Graciela Martin, and today we have a remarkable guest joining us, someone who's breaking barriers and changing the landscape of landscape architecture, quite literally. Let me introduce you to Carter, a talented landscape architect by day and creative force behind the YouTube channel Design It Green. But wait, before you assume that's his given name, let's clear the air. Carter is the name he goes by, although he might as well be called Design It Green because of the incredible work he's doing in the field. In this episode, we're peeling back the layers and getting to know Carter, the passionate advocate for making landscape architecture accessible to everyone. In the midst of the COVID pandemic, during his senior year of school, Carter embarked on a creative journey. He started Design It Green as a way to break the mold, to shatter the gates that kept knowledge hidden, and to share the beauty and intricacies of landscape architecture with the world. Throughout our conversation, we'll explore Carter's motivations, the challenges he faced, and the impact he's making in the industry. We'll discuss the importance of dismantling barriers, sharing knowledge, and celebrating the unique fusion of art and science that is landscape architecture. So buckle up and get ready to be inspired as we delve into the story of Carter, the landscape architect turned content creator, and the journey that's transforming how we perceive the world outside our windows. One last thing before we start our episode. Shout out to Daniel Sagaon for being the first person to guess who the next guest was. Now, let's get right on to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Greenside Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, and his name is Design It Green, right? That's your name? That's your given name in the hospital? They gave that name. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Carter, not Design It Green. I am a by day landscape architect, and then as most of you all probably know, I have a content creation channel called Design It Green, where we kind of explore the world of landscape architecture and help teach and do all those things for new students, current students, or anyone interested in the field of landscape architecture.
So cool. I love the work that you do and the YouTube videos that you create. They're really, really well made. And I think a lot of other people too are just like, man, this dude's creating content like left and right. And it's like good content too. So we're going to talk today a little bit about just who you are, because like I said before, I think it's just so easy to start in this landscape design industry or just to talk about the industry itself and be like, so this is landscape architecture, and we all trying to define what it is, which I think is still good to do, right? To like have our own definition of it, but which is definitely going to be a question I'm going to ask you too. But just kind of like breaking the mold, of like, okay, what are you doing to the industry? How are you kind of changing the conversation and with your content? The same with my audience is as students, trying to reach the student audience. So what made you want to do landscape architecture geared videos at all?
I think there's a couple reasons why I wanted to start the channel. I think one of the main things, just to give like a background, it was the middle of COVID for me. So it was my senior year of school when I decided to start it. And it was kind of a creative outlet, something that kind of filled time at the time and was something that was very much for fun. But the goal of it, I think, was going throughout school, a lot of times, a lot of things in the kind of learning process that we find can be a little bit gatekept, I found. So my school in particular, very competitive. So say you learned something, you wouldn't tell anybody about how you did that. And I think it really kind of created like this kind of barrier between learning landscape architecture and just trying to be better at the field. So I think one of the first things I wanted to do by making the channel was kind of just peel it back and show everyone that everyone can do this, and here's some different ways on how you can kind of do it your own way.
I love that. That's so key right there, what you just said. I did a YouTube video myself and trying my hand at it. And I just did it on like presentations and like how important it is to show your work, and I was reading a book, and I'm not sure if you have the same book, because I feel like you just said exactly what the book is all about, which is like stop gatekeeping, just tell everyone about what you're doing, share it with everyone. Why gatekeep? Why do that? It doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, and I don't think that's like I wasn't trying to be negative in saying that my school, gatekeeps
Yeah,
everything,
yeah.
but I think it's just
Right.
the
Yeah.
nature. It's like a very
Yep.
competitive field. It's
Right.
art. It's this kind of form where everyone's trying to compete to be the best in school. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to make it more accessible to everyone. And I think, like piggybacking off that, a lot of the content you would find on YouTube is mostly architecture based. I know I learned a
Yes.
lot from, you know, watching some of the creators on architecture, but it doesn't all apply to us.
Hmm.
So I wanted to kind of, I guess, take the role of being that person to show everyone what the world of landscape architecture is all about.
And I feel like no one, even architects, don't really even know what the world looks like, what that
Right.
is, which is insane. You
It's not
know, it's not good.
good.
It's not good at all. Like, and it's hard because, like, I think too, when I started in school, I was like, architects, those guys, blah, blah, blah. And then as I graduated, just more of like I wish you knew, I wish you knew what it was,
Yeah.
because it is really cool. And we had a studio where we had architecture students and
Right.
landscape students. And I loved that studio. I mean, for me, other students had issues, but my partner was the best. Diana Vasquez, shout out to you, girl. You're the best. And it was just so cool to talk to somebody that understood their world so well. I understood my world really well, and we worked really well together, and we were able to create a really neat project. But I think that your videos are talking to a wide array of people. And you even mentioned to me that even people outside of the industry are reaching out to you, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think there's that side of it. And then the kind of last goal in mind was just to basically create more of a network for landscape architecture and more of a place to come learn about landscape architecture. I think social media is so important, especially with younger generations, on
Um,
like just learning about what you might be interested in. So having some representation in terms of social media for landscape architecture, what it is, I think the more people that know about it, the better our field can grow and develop. I have my tutorial side, and then there's also more theory, conceptual side of
right.
the channel where we just kind of talk broadly about different subjects just so that people are more aware of it. Because as you know, there's so much in the kind of realm of landscape architecture that just goes beyond what people think of just picking out trees or like mowing the lawn. So
Yes.
there's
Yes.
just so much layers in landscape architecture. So I think it's just such a great field because you can always be learning something new. You might not be learning something new about design. You might be learning something new
Yep.
about ecology or people or cultures. And I think all of those things are really valuable to make you a better designer, but I think knowing about landscape architecture potentially could make you just a better, more well-rounded human as well.
Ooh, profound, profound. Just a better human. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just think like you
Yeah.
have to be a well-rounded person to be a landscape architect and to really design for everyone. So I think it just makes you a better person just for knowing
Yes.
more about this field.
Yeah, because you're right. You have to do a lot of research on people, on cultures, on ecology, and the way that the land and nature functions. That is so important. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And like, so you said something actually I want to go back to because it kind of piqued my curiosity. You said that you made these YouTube videos to as your creative outlet in school,
Yeah,
right?
so I think I would say I used it more of a creative outlet post grad, but I think
Mm.
it was more of an expression of just what I was interested in school rather than you kind of have to choose a project that you go in a certain direction and you have to make these things that look really nice. Whereas this was kind of just more of a for fun, let's try a bunch of different things that we probably wouldn't put, in a portfolio or something and just give back to
Yeah,
the like community that I've been learning about. So
that's so neat. Yeah. Yeah, and also people are not typically like a person is not going to take the time out of their busy schedule to
right.
do content creation or YouTube or things like that. So it takes an immense, again, of consistency and discipline. Which do you feel like you learned? Like, are you just
There has been so many like 2 steps forward, like 3 steps back scenarios of just like, I mean, the whole content creation, social realm, like just being prepared for all that was a whole learning curve that I think like I'm still learning about now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's the same thing with me too, is trying to understand how that world works. One thing that I always felt is just totally against everyone is the algorithm. Why are you against me? It's like I'm trying to
I
create
know.
content and it's
You're just
just
hoping it likes you.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Like
please
how
like
can
me.
yeah, please like me. Like how can I nurse you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But
On that note of like consistency and stuff, I think like time management and all those things you just have to be really good at just to be able to manage a, full-time job that in our field is often more than 40 hours, as you know. So
mm,
just finding like my own schedule and what works for me to be able to create things, which I think is natural in terms of like a creator. I think creators being tied down to like a 9 to 5 is kind of tough, which
yeah.
opens up, I know, a whole new can of worms for a conversation, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just really hard to find your creative window. It might not be in that 9 to 5 time frame. So for
Yeah.
me, I have a lot of creativity like earlier in the morning or later at night, and that's tends to be when I am creating things.
Nice. And when you say creating things, like what specifically?
It's just like idea brainstorming for different like videos or research on different topics that you could talk about. It could just be playing around with drawings or looking at different things that might be interesting to tell people about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like creativity really does have multiple different ways of rearing itself, especially with doing videos and stuff like that. I think that does require a level of like a certain level of creativity and organization that you have to create things that you not only you but then it's also kind of doing this balancing act of trying to do videos for other people too.
I would say like the last few months has been a huge realization of just of making sure that I'm still doing things that I am enjoying and so
Mm,
that the content is still
mhm.
better and
Yep.
putting all of my effort into it and trying to find the right balance.
Everyone talks about the dream of quitting that 9 to 5 and just doing everything, and it's just like, how realistic is that? Because you have to, in some sense, like you have to do something and hope that people like it so that you
Right.
could do it more and then possibly get paid for it,
Yeah.
that would
And
be even better.
and you might end up spending a lot more time than your 9 to 5 to try and make
Yes.
something like that work as well.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it takes time. It takes
Yeah.
time. Yeah. How long has it been since you started the channel?
So I created probably my first video, I think, the summer after I graduated. So that'd be 2021. And then I didn't post for like 8 months after that. And then I think I started up again in I think probably spring of 2022. And then I've been I would say pretty consistent since 2022. So about probably a year and a half now of like consistent, actually dedicated to the channel and growing it and all that.
Do you feel like you learned anything within that 8 month period of not creating videos? And what kind of sparked that I'm going to do it and I'm going to commit to this?
Yeah, well, I think honestly, I I kind of let go of it because I think the shock of working full time
Mm,
and just readjusting to life after college was a lot. I just didn't have time for it really, and
yeah.
then was able to kind of ground myself and come back to it a little bit later with a little bit better of idea of what I wanted to do
Mm,
and just a little bit better of a setup. So I think over those like 7 8 months, however long it was really just more of game planning in my head of how I saw the channel and what I kind of wanted the channel to be and represent.
mm.
And then like finally getting back into it when I felt that I was able to give time back to that.
Wow. That's awesome that you're able to like commit to it and just go, headlong on that and stick to it. So I'm curious. I'm more curious. So let's rewind back to when you found out about landscape architecture. Like at what point in your life did you find out about this? Did you even know it existed? You know,
No. So I think like to go way back, I've always been like very enamored with the landscape and
Mm,
just like I love to hike, I love to be outdoors. Just I just love to be immersed in nature. And then there was also the side of me that really liked knowing how things were put together. Like for whatever reason, I like binge watched How It's Made when I was probably like 7 years old. So I just really liked how like knowing how things were built. I also like always played with Legos or whatever when I was little
right.
and just liked building things using my hands. So I think
Yeah.
that's like my very early background. But then as I grew up, I kind of thought I always wanted to be an engineer. So I actually went to school first for mechanical and civil engineering. And then while I was at school, with different school, I had to go to these lecture series as part of the requirement for the class. And I went to this lecture by a landscape architect, Matthew Cunningham, who is like a really awesome residential landscape designer up in Massachusetts. And he gave like this just awesome presentation speech that I was like, this is awesome. I want to do this. This
Yeah.
seems like the perfect marriage of like my creative side with the kind of more mechanical, like structured side. Because I think for me, I never was like an art kid. Like I didn't really take art classes. I was never an artist. I still am working on trying to draw better.
Yep.
But I always had this creative side, and I just always felt like while I was in school for engineering that I just wouldn't be fulfilled because I always had this creative side. And I think once I discovered what landscape architecture was, that I really just took it and ran with it. And then I switched majors sophomore year, and then the rest is history.
Wow, and here you are.
Here I
Wow.
am.
That's that's one thing I didn't realize about landscape architecture is that there is a side for the left brainers. Like it's not just right brain creative,
Yeah,
like plants and stuff. Like there is totally, totally space and room for people who do mechanical things, like people who like the details, like people who
yeah.
do that.
I think that's the question I get asked most often on my channel is people are really interested in landscape architecture and they really want to do it, but they always ask, I'm terrible at drawing, I can't draw. I don't think I can survive this. And I always just tell them that you have 4 years to learn and build your craft. You don't need to be perfect at drawing when you get there. Yes, there will be people there when you show up who are
Yeah.
awesome at everything and you will feel the struggle, but just
Yeah.
keep at it and you will catch up because you just have 4 years to kind of create that craft, 5 for some schools. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, it's just a different type of drawing. I mean,
Yes.
it's not the traditional art in a way. It can be. The drawing style in landscape architecture is different and there's ways to make more mechanically than others. So
Hmm.
I always tell people that just don't worry about it. Just go into it and just try your best.
Yes. And I always tell people this that when I got into school, I had to draw. I was the same exact way. I was, no, I'm not drawing. There's no way.
Yeah,
But oh, in order to get into school, you have to draw. And I'm like,
right.
oh. So I committed to that. I went on YouTube and I went on this, I learned from this one guy. I don't remember his name, but man, he was amazing. And after that week of me drawing and drawing, learning from his videos, I ended up submitting those drawings and getting accepted because I
Yeah,
just you can do it. It's just takes time and effort and energy and drawing is, that's one aspect of it.
right. Exactly. That's a whole other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whole other. It's just like all you're doing is just trying to develop sort of a mindset when you're
right.
drawing. You're trying to develop some sort of lens to view the world, not so much just I see it with my eyes, the more detailed
Yeah,
internalizing of it.
yeah. That's kind of what I use it for. I think I
Yeah.
don't know. Technology's come so far that we don't really rely on hand drawings for a lot of those like high-end renderings at this point. So sketching is really just like idea dumping and just
Yep.
putting your ideas out on the paper, and you probably don't even show a lot of people them. You're just kind of brainstorming. So that's a whole other
Exactly.
thing to not be scared of as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Especially when you're doing content creation and you're
Yeah.
putting out your stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, this is
Exactly.
yeah. But no, you do really cool stuff. I mean, you posted some, right? Or you've done like you've sketched with the app Morpholio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've done some really cool sketches I think people can learn from.
Yeah.
And so when you were in high school, did
Yeah.
you go in thinking I'm going to be a civil engineer, or were you kind of lost in what to do?
I think I was like 70-30 because I applied for some schools for architecture,
Mm,
but most of the schools I applied to were for like mechanical engineering. And for whatever reason, I always thought I would end up like working for like a car industry, doing like concept things for engineering for them.
oh,
So I don't know. I think I was just kind of set on that. I also like come from a heavy engineering family. So I think that
mm,
was like not all I knew, but something I knew that worked, and like I would have a great network for how to like have a
right.
successful career as an engineer. But then once I got into it, the first couple months out of school, I was like a little culture shock of like, is this really what I want to do? And then like I
Yeah.
felt like after a couple months, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to
Yeah.
do.
What was that moment like? Like, were you like sketching something or doing a cool project?
It actually was when I saw my first project completed and was on the
Mm,
site after like we went through lots of different deadlines and lots of construction like administration stuff, just seeing the project come together and like just stepping foot on there and seeing the ribbon cutting and seeing all the people enjoying the space. I was like, yeah, this is
that's
this
so
is
neat.
what all the work is for.
That is so neat. Wow, that's a really good feeling when you work so hard on something and you're in the process and then you look back and you can say, wow, look what
Yeah,
this
because
looks like.
as you know, like you don't get that side of it in school. Like you do all these really cool drawings. Sometimes you help out different communities. Like I know my school, you did a lot of projects for different people, and they kind of went whatever direction they wanted to go with from the
Mm,
information they gathered. But this was the first time where you did something and you got to see the like raw reactions from people in the space, which is always something I've been really kind of in love with in terms of landscape architecture, is just the impact you can make on like a greater community.
mm, that's wonderful. And the fact that you even have a hand in that, I feel like it's kind of hard not to, do that within the field of landscape architecture. Not to say that there's parking lot jobs, there's parking
Yeah.
lot projects that I've worked on
Hey,
myself,
you're helping people park.
necessary, but at the same time, it's just like, okay, like, cool. But,
Right.
you don't see like the impact it makes on people. Like, you don't get to see like, wow, people walking in a park and be like, oh, the eyes
Exactly.
of like
Yeah.
the wonder, the excitement, the like exploration and all that. There is joy in that. And I think that yeah. And that's kind of a perfect segue into that question of just like the journey, the process, like what makes it all worth it? And would you say it is just improving communities and all that? I mean, going
Yeah.
through how long you went to 4 years of landscape?
4 years of school. Yeah.
4 years and got your bachelor's?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
now you're 3 years and
I know.
yeah, wow.
Yeah. I just think to your point, to your question, that just knowing that you might have impacted one person and made their day a little bit better, you made a space more enjoyable for that one person to come to every day, is really what drives it for me. That's really kind of the biggest driver for my content as well. Just knowing that I helped one person with their decision to go into the field or not to go into the field, or
Mm,
to help them out for their project that they've been stressing out for, who knows how long. I just think
wow.
being able to impact people and give back to communities and just people along the way of what I know, because what I know might, you can take it with a grain of salt, but at least you're hearing someone else's perspective, and it helps either inform you that you're doing the right thing, or maybe you're not doing the right thing, and you either go in whatever direction you feel is best for you. So those are kind of
Right.
what drives me and keeps me coming back.
Yeah. And being in college, being in a 4 year, I was in a 5 year program, and that was,
Ooh.
yeah. I mean, at this point, I deserve a doctorate because I was in like a year and a half of community
Yeah.
college. And then I started my 5 year program with like high schoolers, and I love them. I mean, they're great. They were great people, but it was like, oh my gosh, after 7 years of school, it's like,
Yeah.
oh.
I need a
But
break.
I think I need to stop going to school. I think that's
Right.
the actual lesson learned. But now, after school and everything, looking back, what would you wish you had learned in school that I guess you maybe didn't prepare you for the real world, or you wish had prepared you for the real world? Like, is there
Ooh.
anything you thought of that?
Yeah. I just think up front, before I give the reason, I guess, I think it's so hard to prepare you for all the aspects of landscape architecture because it is so broad.
Yeah.
But I just think for me, just understanding some of the end goals and how to manage and deal with some clients, and kind
Mm.
of the back end stuff of pro bono and the business side
Mm.
of things, I think would be really interesting to know, because I think it helps you
Yeah.
understand some of the end processes and what you're working towards. And then
Mm.
there's like the whole in-field knowledge that I just don't know how you would teach it, honestly. You just need to hire a project manager to teach your studio for a year or something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like that whole knowledge of just being able to understand what you're drawing, and the like realization that every little line you make on a CAD drawing is going to be built one way or the other. So I think just
Mm.
realizing that is something that I didn't know about, because you kind of just loosey goosey draw stuff in school just to make it look nice
Yeah.
oftentimes. And then you get
Totally.
into the profession and you're like, no, this needs to be like perfect offsets. Like there's just, you need to do this a specific way or it will cause
Yeah.
a lot of
You just
problems.
said a trauma word for me. Perfect offset.
Sorry.
Like, oh my God.
But you know what I mean? Like it's just,
Totally.
it's a whole other side of the field that you just, I think it's just really hard to teach in school, because in school I do think it's good that you kind of learn about just kind of overarching concepts and just design testing, rather than having to be introduced to all those other realities that
Mm,
happen in the space. I think it's just a really hard balance to manage.
it is. And it's hard because when you try to brainstorm, like, oh, how could the schools prepare you better for the work life or workforce? But in reality, it's a very difficult line. It's very difficult to do because you're not on the ground. You're not dealing with real world problems that could affect
Right.
budgets, that affect clients, that affect the business, the branding. A lot is at stake when you work at a firm versus at school. You're just trying to make the deadline. Like that's all you care about,
Yeah.
you know? So it's just totally different world. And it's yeah, it's hard. It's hard to figure out what the solution could be. But the business side, I think you're, yeah, totally right. I wish I had known that too, the business side of landscape architecture,
Like
because
I
it
would
feels
have
like,
no idea how, like if I wanted to open up my own firm, I would have no idea how to do that.
yes.
And I feel like you should have at least a general sense of like what direction you should
Mhm.
go in. Obviously, you can reach out to people, or maybe your own firm or other people who have just started firms, or something like that. But I would have just no idea how to do that in
Yes.
in today's world.
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. When I was at, my firm, it was just, and a few firms, like I worked for just like a couple of them. And it was just like you- the business, the way that they run business almost kind of seems like hush hush, at times. Like it's kind
Yeah,
of like, well, you just do the production, and we'll worry about that other stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to know what that is. It's just because it is a business. Like I think that's one thing I did not think about when I came out of school.
right.
It's a business. Like,
yeah, they're doing art and cool illustratives and like details, but it's
Right.
like it's a business. They have to survive, in this climate. Do you ever think that you could see yourself owning your own business, or do you feel okay, I'm happy? Well, I guess because now you're in the process, right? You're still fresh in the industry. Would you ever see yourself starting your own thing?
Yeah, I don't know. My dream obviously is to be able to do the whole content thing full time.
Yeah.
I would love
Mm,
to, I don't know, there's a side of me that would like to get into teaching because that's
yeah.
kind of already what I sort of do.
Yeah,
So I could
exactly,
see, I
exactly.
don't know, I'm at like this weird point where I could see myself going in a bunch of different directions. I could see myself
Yeah.
like going all in on the content thing if it, grew to a point
Mm,
where I felt that it could be something, and then maybe supplement that with like some work that I do on the side for people. I could also see just kind of moving up the corporate ladder, I guess. I think that's the
yeah.
least interesting. And then there's the whole other side of maybe go back to school, become a teacher, and do something a little bit more formal than what I do on, my channel, and work for a school or university and just
Yeah.
increase the knowledge and give back to the field.
That's so neat. What would you teach on, like specifically?
Um, I think I would, that's a good question. I like modeling the most, so I feel like if I could do a class on
Mm.
like just modeling would be really fun. But I think the grading and all those things I'm good at, the math-based stuff. I think I'd be a good teacher at teaching people how to grade and do swales and all that other important stuff that is boring to everyone, but is kind of exciting to me. But then, yeah, either that or modeling, honestly, are the two things I really like. But I would love to just like paint back or just peel back the layers of like if I could do a class on just the professional world or things like that, just real life expectations in the field, I think would be really fun too.
Yes, yes. And I think that's where YouTube kind of gives you that opportunity in a way.
Yeah.
Some small, well, actually, I mean, influence, like that's like the key word, right? Is like you're able to have sort of an influence
Yeah.
and talk about those things.
Yeah. Influencer is like a trigger word because I hate
I
like
know.
I was at Labash and a bunch of people like, oh my God, you're like a landscape architect influencer. And I was like, no, don't say
No, I'm just a
that.
landscape architect. That's so funny. I know. And influencer is kind of like a weird word because it almost makes you
Yeah.
sound like celebrity.
Yeah. I'm like,
And
I'm just
yeah,
a regular dude that like
yeah,
just likes to give back and tell
yeah.
people about what's going on. Like that's it. Not trying to be famous.
Yep, yep, yep. But that's great that you're already coming at it with this humility of just, I'm just here helping people. And
Yeah, I mean
that's all I want to do.
that's just the goal. I mean,
Yeah.
I just want to help people in any way that I can because
Yeah.
I feel like I was someone always looking for help going through school on just how to be
Mm,
better at certain things because I always felt behind in a way coming from not an art background or
mm.
something like that. So I know people are in the same shoes as I was in school, so knowing that I can just help them out at all is what drives me.
Yeah. I think coming from like that personal background of just, like you said, wanting to help yourself and then being able to offer that to people. What would be your advice to somebody who is struggling to transition into like the landscape architecture environment, let's say at school, not so much at work. But they're just because I'm the same way. Like I came from like I think I changed a major 4 times. I didn't even know what the heck I was doing. So what would be your advice?
I mean, I would just say like just don't be so hard on yourself and let yourself grow into the person that you want to become. It's not going to be an overnight thing, and you just have to keep at it and just also know your personal boundaries. You don't need to spend every night, every moment in studio to get better. You can grow outside of the studio, not working on projects. Take some time to kind of ground yourself, come back, like do some drawing, spend a couple hours, leave, go somewhere else,
Yeah.
come back, regroup, and you'll find that you are growing a little. At least for me, I found
Mm,
that by going away, doing something else, taking my mind off of it and coming back, I was able to be better and grow faster instead of like the kind of creative block that you end up just trying to work through and you just get frustrated. And I just think take breaks, enjoy your time there, and just don't rush and let yourself grow into the person that you want to become.
Right. Yeah. That's huge, is just kind of stepping away from that. Because I think like, when you're doing these projects, you're overloading your brain
Yeah.
with ideas. It's overwhelming. And I remember being up until 6 in the morning sometimes,
Yeah.
it's just common. But the thing is that you should like what you do, because then it's like
Certainly.
I would rather be up at 6 a.m. getting a good project done versus
Yeah,
not. But
definitely.
yeah, but staying, like, walking away, just kind of letting your brain just, yeah, just sort of take a breather.
Yeah, I think back to like sophomore year when we first started doing studios and just like seeing our class be just so overwhelmed with what's
Mm.
going on in the whole studio process, because I still can remember like the first studio and just the workload that you just don't know how to manage and just freaking out about it.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Oh my
Like
gosh.
it does get better if you're just starting school and you're listening.
Yeah.
You just start, it gets better. You get
You're
used to
gonna be okay.
it.
You'll get through it. Yeah, it is. It is kind of, I remember when my mom was home, like I would be in the kitchen coming from school, or just working on, because this has happened multiple times, working on a project, and I'll just bust out of my room and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. It's just my mom always telling me, like, you can do anything you set your mind to. You're gonna be
Yeah.
okay. So I think it's just such a good advice to, like, just, it's okay, you're gonna get through it. And you learn a lot, through that process. And for you, I guess,
Oh
like,
yeah.
what things did prepare you for the real world in school?
Well, I think the the teaching of like the design process, I think my school did a really good job of just
Mm.
emulating the real world process of how you take, your basic concept ideas throughout like a kind of more of a final project. But I would say like honestly that takes you through like the schematic design phase in the real world, but that's like
Yeah,
kind of everything. I mean, once you
it
know that
is.
process,
Hmm.
you kind of just repeat it at a more refined version in the next stages, honestly. But I think that prepared me really well. Just the like general organization and like time management skills that you have to develop in order to survive at the school
Yeah.
really help prepare you for what you are going to be doing in the real world and how to just manage deadlines and those things.
Mm.
Um, how to communicate, how to tell your ideas, how to do it in ways that's, verbally and also just on the paper. Like all those things are super important that you learn in school that apply every day for the real world.
Yeah, totally. I think, there's always going to be something that we're going to have to take from the theory part and apply it into the real
Yeah.
world at some point. But for you, when you were transitioning into the real world and you were just trying to navigate that, how was that process for you? Like, was it difficult? Was it, new and exciting? Or was it just like, how was it? Because no one knows how the role was going to look like until you, like, step into your foot into the office.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think I had like, I guess probably an incredibly skewed view of how the transition process went because I was hired in the middle of the pandemic.
Mm.
So my first 4 months was like remotely full time, which I think is an incredibly hard
Oh,
learning
oh
environment
my
to
gosh.
learn how to navigate full time job at home
Remote,
remotely and learn all that.
remote. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, full time.
So that's a
Oh,
little bit skewed, but I think the like main challenge was just figuring out how to like have time back for myself. I think the 9 to 5 is an interesting topic because it's not really just 9 to 5. It's, the time that you processing it before you go in. It's the time you're deloading after.
right.
So just I think the overall feeling of being like you're tied down for a set amount of time, whereas school, you kind of had like some classes, you might have an hour class here, an hour class there, a 3 hour studio, and you basically just got the work done when you had to. I think the
Yeah.
change from getting it done to get it done and having to do stuff from this time period was probably the most challenging thing that I went through. And then honestly, just it's, I think probably personal, but just getting used to like just sitting in an office for 40, 50 hours a week was like just a big thing to get used to, because I like a very mobile person, always moving around. So just that was another challenge as well.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I get that.
First world
100%.
problems.
Yeah, right. It's like just get used to getting a salary, you know?
Yeah.
But it's so true. I mean, you just get used to 5 year or 4 years of whatever the heck, survive basically. And then
Yeah.
you do structured 9 to 5, you know, and it's like now you have the incentive to work because you are making a salary. So it's like,
Right.
okay, I need my benefits, I need my dental, I need my, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
And I like what I like what I do, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, it is a transition, and it's
Yeah.
not,
And I think like,
yeah.
I think a year removed, the other realization is in school, as you're growing up, there's a lot of change. There's always change every year. The people you meet might be changing. You're changing schools, you're going on to new places. When you go to
Yeah.
college, you're like, okay, I'll be doing this for 4 years and then I'll go do something else. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I got to about a year and a half removed from school, and I was like, oh, this is like the next 40 years. And the
Yeah. Yeah.
change goes from like rapid change all the time to a very steady thing that sort of you lose time with. I mean, I feel like
Mm.
that was still COVID, so I feel like COVID time just didn't exist for me. And then it's very easy, I think, when you're working 9 to 5, maybe a year removed, to just feel like every day is the same and you're just kind of going through the motions at some point. Even
Yeah.
as like creative of a field as we're in, I think sometimes you just fall into a pattern. I think I just wasn't prepared for that aspect either.
Yeah. And you're not alone. You know, it is definitely a challenge, but you've come out of the other side of that, you know.
Right.
So that's your proof that it's possible.
Yeah.
Is what
I
it
do
is.
think like there's waves, at least for me. I go
Mhm.
through a lot of waves. I think naturally, I don't know if it's a creative person thing, but like I burn out like
Yeah.
super fast on some things. So like I go through like periods of disinterest in like the daily motions, and then I'm super passionate again, and then it just like waves of,
Mm,
and I think that's just a creative thing that happens, at least for
yeah.
me.
Yeah. That sounds about right. I mean, I think that because like, you know, when you're in the profession, like it's not, it is your life in a way, but it's not, you know, it's like it's,
Yeah.
so there's things about it that, you know, don't change, and then you go to work every day doing the same thing, but you're also dealing with life. Like you're doing
Right.
life at the same time of working. So whatever inspires you outside of work might fuel your passion, right, for work. But then sometimes
Right.
it doesn't. You have a really tough day, and then you're just like, I hate landscape architecture today, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's that you're right. So would you say now, 3 years in, where would you say you are in sort of like the experience spectrum? Like you're still early,
um, yeah,
or
it's a really hard question. I feel like I can finally apply for every job that is 3 to 5 years.
yeah.
Because I feel like every job out of college is 3 to 5 years for
Yeah,
no reason. Entry level, by the way.
finally. Entry level, 3 to 5 years.
So like it's cool that I've reached the threshold of like I could probably just apply to anywhere because I have enough experience. I think I don't know, I think everyone's like first couple years is so different. It's hard to gauge where you're at. Like I know I was at a really small firm. I had my hands on all aspects of the project. So in a sense, I feel like I'm ahead of a lot of people who went to a really large firm and a really great firm in most cases. but really only spent their time, modeling, or they spent their time in CAD or
Yep.
in concepts. Whereas I learned a lot about everything, where I think that sets me up a little bit better in terms of like moving towards maybe like more of an associate level than others. So I just think it's like a hard place to put myself, because obviously I don't know where everyone else is at. I can only speak for what I know and how I feel about myself. So I do feel like I have enough experience where I could walk in and fill, any role at this point. I don't, like, when I started my new job, I didn't feel the same pressure and, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing, like I felt with my first job. But there's just still so much that I need to learn about that is happening too.
What are you kind of looking forward to learning, now?
I think just honing in on like my skills and just being better at representing what I'm drawing and making sure that what I'm drawing is actually buildable, I think is something that is always a struggle. I know I've talked with like principals about that kind of concept, and that's something that you're always learning about. So I think there's that side. There's the whole administration planting knowledge that I'm really interested in, picking out products, picking out the right products, how to plant better, what types work here, what types don't work here. So it's all like that secondary knowledge that I'm finding interest in now.
Yeah. And that's really neat that you're at the point where you're just like, okay, I've passed this threshold. I can start learning other things now. And that's also shows consistency as well. It's just like sticking to something, continuing to grow in spite of how you feel some days too.
Right. Yeah. Cause I think like the first year you are like really just learning on how the project like timelines work. I know like my first project I went through from like schematic design all the way through construction administration was really valuable for me to be a part of, just because I was able to then go on to the next project and understand what is worth doing in schematic design and what's not worth doing in schematic design and some of the other phases. Just because like once I had a better understanding of what the end result is supposed to be and how to get there, I was able to like better prepare myself during the earlier stages, so I didn't have to spend as much time later on going back and fixing things.
Right.
So that is a whole other side of landscape architecture that I think you learn about. And I think just going through your first project right out of school is very intense with the deadlines and some of the pushes that happen.
Yeah.
But once you see and go through like 2 or 3 of those, you then are able to, I think, have more time back to look at other things that you're interested in, because you're not freaking out and just trying to keep up with the pace that's really rapid in our field.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And when you were starting to look for a firm, did you have an idea of what you wanted to work on, like as far as projects go, and what you wanted to learn?
I knew I wanted to be in public realm. I knew I didn't want to do like private gardens, because again, my interest is like the impact on a larger group rather than doing really high-end residential. So I knew I wanted to be in the public realm, but I don't know if I had like some firms in mind that I think are like the dream big firms. Like, I wanted to work for Sasaki or OJB or, the big, firms that everyone wants to work for, MVVA. But I think I made the choice that I pretty much wanted to work for those firms that I talked about, the really big firms.
Right.
And then as I was kind of going through and applying and talking to people about where I really should end up, one of my professors who, I ended up working for was like, you should go small first and you should learn all about everything, and then take your skills that you learned over however long you want to be there, or maybe you love it, you don't want to leave, but most likely nobody ever stays at their first job. So take your knowledge and then bring it to where you want to go, because you'll have just so much more knowledge. And that's kind of the route I went with my firm progression. And I wouldn't change it at all.
That's super smart. I wish I had someone tell me that, like, yeah, your first firm is not going to be, the first one you stay at. And
Right.
one thing I didn't know, I don't know if you knew this, but like, it's actually quite common for people to like hop around different firms for a while, like 3 or 4 firms.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just like, it's really hard going through the interview process to kind of gauge what the firm's all about. They might do really cool work, but you might hate working there. It might be people you don't want to be with, or maybe it's just unreasonable for you to manage that.
Right. Yeah.
And there's also just every firm does different projects in a different way. And I think
Yes.
you really kind of have to fit into a team. It's not really about fitting into the firm. It's more of like, do you get along with that team? Do you want to put in the time for your teammates and your colleagues? So
Right.
I think it's definitely valid to kind of hop around and find something that
Yeah.
you really like, and find your place, and then put your all into that. I think it's really hard. I mean, there's so many different firms, there's so many different types of designs and places that you can go into within the field, that
Totally.
and then just college in general. I mean, it's really hard to know what you want to do.
It
So
is. Yeah.
at 18 years old, you're told, pick something out and do it till you're 70. So
Yeah. Oh my God. I always talk about this all the time in our side talks. It was just like, why do they instill in you at such a young age? Like,
yeah,
what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And you're like, I'm 10. I don't know.
yeah, I have no rational thoughts at the moment.
Like literally my
Anything.
brain's not developed, It's not even fully developed, guys.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to take time,
Yeah, I think it's also something that's really hard. I think for people post grad, like in your 20s, it's just feeling like the pressure of, I need to have my whole life figured out. I need to be making X amount of money. I need to be on my own. I need to do all this. And like, yeah, it's great if you're fortunate enough to know what you want. Like I believe I was fortunate enough to know my path pretty early on, and it stuck through, and like I really enjoyed it. But there's tons of people that I know. I have a bunch of friends who just, it's really hard. I mean, so I just think your 20s should be more exploratory, and I wish people would recognize that. Like a lot of the older folks would, come on board and recognize that knowing what you want to do in your 20s is really hard.
Yes.
And just take the time to figure it out. And if you don't owe anyone anything in terms of like the workforce. I mean, yeah, give your all when you're there, but if it's not what you want, if your passions are somewhere else, go in that direction. Definitely the mindset shift that I've had in the last year of just like, do things for me, it's about me first, and then the other pieces will fall in line once you figure out yourself.
And you have to take the time to ask yourself what you like, who you are, like, what is it that you like?
It's a hard question.
It is. And sometimes like you have to talk to people because you realize that this is actually more common than you think.
Exactly. I think you can talk to anyone and they'll be in the same spot as you.
Exactly.
Even like someone who on the surface thinks or appears like they have it all together. I mean, they're still most likely going through, what they want to be doing as well. So
yeah, and that they're trying to navigate that too.
Yeah, it's just a real world is incredibly hard to navigate, and it's overwhelming when you first come out.
It is. But you're doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes too, it's just like, it can sound depressing, but in a lot of ways it's exciting. Like I remember,
it is.
Yeah, like I remember when people telling me that, they're just like, oh, I'm so excited for you. And you're like, thank you. It's hard to
I don't feel that way at the moment.
That means like you're not worried about me, which is is like a way better place to be. Well, thank you so much. This was great. Really, really enjoyed talking to you and just getting your thoughts on what it's like to be a new professional / experienced professional and trying to navigate this world. I have one last question for you, and it's probably the most hated question ever. But what do you think landscape architecture is?
I guess the definition that I usually tell people who don't know what landscape architecture is landscape architecture is everything that a building is not. So anything that you see, interact with, look at, have any sort of thought about at all that lives outside of a structure or a building, that is the realm of possibility for landscape architects. So anything you see is most likely designed by a landscape architect. That's not the architecture. So I think there's a lot of stereotypes of landscape architecture, as you know. So when I tell people that, it kind of gives people, oh, you guys do this too? Yes, we do it all. I think that's my single. It's so hard. I mean, it's so diverse of a subject, but I think that's the easiest way to describe it for me.
Yeah. And that's exactly the way that I describe it too, is that it's anything in between a building.
Yeah.
You know? And it's just because I feel like you just can't pigeonhole it. You can't just be like, well, it's this and that. It's well, you can. Actually, some people do view it a very specific way, but really, like at the end of the day, it's like anything in between a building. And then people are like, oh, okay.
And then they're like, oh, so you do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. You're like, so yeah.
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, this was great. Thanks so much, Carter. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed talking to you. And I'm really excited for students or young professionals or anyone else who listens to this to be able to learn from you and learn from what you do and from your videos and all that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was a really fun conversation, and I hope everyone enjoys listening.
Yay. Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning in to this enlightening episode of the Greenside Podcast. We hope you enjoyed gaining insights into the world of landscape architecture and the incredible work of Carter, aka Design It Green. If you found this episode as inspiring as I did, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with your friends, family, and anyone who appreciates the beauty of our outdoor spaces. Together, let's spread the knowledge and passion for landscape architecture far and wide. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Greenside Podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you engaging content and fascinating guests. Are you a landscape architecture enthusiast, a student eager to learn, or a professional looking to connect with like-minded individuals? Join our community by following us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at the Greenside Podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep designing, and keep dreaming. Goodbye for now.